Hola, Viviana,
Sí.
ven aquí.
That's babysitter Viviana Ortiz-Lopez being taken away for questioning after deputies said a baby she was caring for had bruising on her face. Now Ortiz-Lopez is in jail facing a child abuse charge, and detectives believe there are more victims. I'll explain why. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Viviana Ortiz-Lopez is accused of abusing a little baby she was paid to babysit. Babies, of course, they're completely defenseless and can do nothing for themselves. They rely on adults to feed them, clean them, and protect them. But sheriff's deputies in Marion County, Florida, say Ortiz-Lopez left the face of this baby girl bruised in more than one place. Deputies picked up Ortiz-Lopez for questioning on the evening of March 10th, after the baby's parents had picked her up from Ortiz-Lopez's home, and they noticed bruises on her face. A probable cause affidavit lays out the case and how the baby girl's mother picked up her daughter from Ortiz-Lopez's home at 1 p.m. on March 10th. She had dropped the baby off at 8 a.m. Deputies say Ortiz-Lopez wanted the baby picked up because she wouldn't stop crying and was fussier than usual. So if you're a mom and you show up at the babysitter and you see injuries on your baby's face, what are you going to do? You are going to ask, how did this happen? Well, the affidavit says Ortiz-Lopez told the baby's mom that the baby caused those injuries by scratching herself, so she needed to bring mittens with her the next day to prevent that from happening again. It appears the injuries only got worse, and the parents called the sheriff. The affidavit states, Deputy Hill obtained several photos of the victim's injuries, which he sent to me. In the photos, I observed apparent bruising along the victim's left cheek. I also observed 4 distinct red lines, which would be consistent with a slap mark. On the victim's nose, I observed swelling and more bruising, which ran to underneath her eyes. Deputy Hill also advised that the victim, along with her parents, would be responding to Advent Hospital to provide further care for the victim. Now, this was very concerning to the deputies and detectives, so they interviewed the baby's mother. The affidavit states she advised when she dropped the victim off she did not have any injuries, but noted she was more fussy than normal. Around 1 p.m., the defendant contacted her and told her to come pick the victim up due to her nonstop crying and not allowing the other children at the location to sleep. The mother advised during this call the defendant sounded desperate for her to come get the victim. The mother arrived to the location, and the defendant immediately brought out the victim's twin brother. The defendant then told her that she needed to come inside to come get the victim. At this time, the mother observed the victim's injuries and began questioning the defendant about it. The defendant advised the victim had done these injuries to herself and continued to state this many times. The mother advised she wasn't sure what to do, so she brought the victim back home and waited for the father to arrive. The detective wrote that while he was at the hospital, he was able to see the baby's injuries, and they were what he saw in the photos from the deputy, and he said they appeared to be consistent with an adult's hand. The detective wrote, the mother further explained that she had only been bringing her children to the defendant's house for the past 2 days. She was recommended to the defendant by a mutual friend. After this incident happened, the mother called the friend and told her what occurred, and the friend told her that she knew the defendant did this and she had to pull her children from her care previously due to this. The friend explained that she is fearful of the defendant and that this is why she did not contact law enforcement. At this time, the mother advised she would be contacting the friend to see if she is willing to come forward with the allegation. The baby was examined by a doctor and a forensic nurse trained in identifying signs of child abuse, and the affidavit details their findings. The victim's doctor, Dr. Rogers, observed the victim on his preliminary review. He noted the victim had apparent petechiae, tiny flat red spots caused by broken blood vessels under the skin around the victim's eyes. He also noted that the victim had major bruising on her face consistent with blunt force trauma. When asked if he believed the victim could do these injuries to herself, he advised she could not. Then Elena Meredith with the Kimberly Center responded and conducted her forensic exam of the victim. She noted additional bruising, which was showing on the other side of the victim's face, along with more red marks underneath the victim's armpits. She advised she is able to determine positive findings for abuse. Again, when asked if she believed the victim would be able to cause these injuries to herself, she advised she would not. Now, this, along with a recorded phone call between the mother and Viviana Ortiz-Lopez that we'll get into shortly, led detectives to bring the babysitter in for questioning.
Policía! Policía! Hola, Viviana?
Sí.
Ven aquí. Ven aquí. Ok. Manos arribas. Ven,
Ok.
ven aquí.
Dame
El
el
teléfono,
teléfono.
el teléfono.
Lleva el teléfono
Hang on.
contigo.
Tranquilo.
Tranquilo.
Tranquilo, está bien.
Ok. Ok.
¿Hablo inglés? No. Okay.
You don't want to hear you speak English? No? Okay. A little bit? Okay. You're being, well, you have to speak with a detective. Detective has questions for her. Okay.
I'd like to bring in Lieutenant Paul Bloom of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant Bloom, a really horribly sad case. You all believe there are more victims out there.
Yeah, it really is, Angenette. This is, I think, any parent's worst nightmare because you're one of the hardest things I think I did in my life, and I've done a lot of hard things in military and this job and everything else. But I think for any parent, one of the hardest things, like me, was dropping my kid off for the first time in kindergarten. It was tough. But when you have to go to work, leave your child with a daycare or babysitter, that concern is always in the back of your mind. Nobody's going to love your child like you do. But and there's some great babysitters and daycares out there that do a fantastic job. But in the back of our minds is this worst fear that something terrible like this could happen. And yes, we feel like this person, if you're capable of doing this for one child, what stops you from doing it to another? And just after their interviews with her and the contradicting stories and the lies that she was telling the detectives, it just causes some concern for us.
Mhm. This was a daycare, a babysitting service run out of the home. Is there any indication that she was regulated or licensed? Because I wasn't seeing that.
Right. Yeah, that's unfortunate. We're not ignorant of the fact that there are a lot of folks that just do this without a license. This is something they're just kind of helping a couple friends out, that kind of a thing. Whether she was or not, I don't know. That's going to be something for more of the regulatory boards here to look into. But I would say, as a cautionary word to parents, make sure the person you're leaving your child with is certified. There's some things with that certification where this person has to be trained in first aid, CPR, in case your child has an emergency, and certain safety, points have to be met in the home as far as fire safety, those kind of things. So I always say it's good to check on those, and having that certification doesn't make somebody perfect or they're going to be the best babysitter, but it's certainly something that's going to help.
Have any other people come forward since this story broke?
Right now, we don't have any new cases that have opened up, but we hope there is none that do come about. But we also know as this story gets out there, and we appreciate you putting it out there for us, that maybe some other parents that have known her, and even going back in years in time, if she's been doing this for a while, that will see the story and maybe speak up.
Mm-hmm. How long has she been babysitting?
That we don't know how long she's been. These folks have had this baby with them for just a short while, but it's even with years of experience, uh, I don't know, that helps her. If you have this mindset where you're willing to hurt a child, um, I don't care how long you've been doing that job. There's a better way to do it. You cannot do that. Not in this society. It's just not going to be tolerated. Certainly in our county, and she's facing some felony charges because of that.
How is the baby doing now?
So we're being told the baby is recovering fine, and thank God. It's not going to be anything that is long term. But you can imagine picking up your child and finding this baby with bruising on the face, and you're being told, "Oh, the baby fell down," I think, and getting a call that your baby won't stop crying. So parents get there because the babysitter's calling because the baby won't stop crying. I wanted to find out probably the reason the baby won't stop crying is because the baby is injured. So uh, I just don't want you to think about the emotions and the anger, the sadness, I don't know, the despair in a parent's heart when you hear that and you see that and experience it. I think and I know a lot of our followers and a lot of your viewers will feel the same way, that it brings up a lot of anger in them, and that natural maternal instinct that should be there is missing, and it's hard for us to understand.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of different stories. Like the baby did it to herself. She needed mittens. The baby was in a swing and did something. So according to the court documents, there were a number of different stories given.
That's right, and I think any parent, myself included, I raised 3 boys. Kids do get hurt on their own sometimes. They just do that, and toddlers at certain ages are more dangerous than other ages, uh, but there's a distinct difference. And when we're getting a story that keeps changing from the person that was there with the task of watching this child, that causes alarm for us. We understand accidents happen. This was not the case, and the evidence proves that. And then she ultimately admits to just harming this baby, slapping this baby. So she's right where she needs to be, behind bars. And our hope for the family is that they can move on, because I know it's in our society, when you have mothers and fathers that both have to work to make ends meet, it's tough, and there's big decisions to make, and your kids are forefront of your mind when you're making these decisions. So hopefully they can move on and find somebody to choose to have a babysitter again that's going to work for them and love that child the way they should.
Lieutenant Paul Bloom, thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you for getting the story out there.
So I want to bring in Randy Kessler. He is a family law attorney. We're going to get into really the fine details about this case, including a call that mom made to the babysitter in front of the detectives. So Randy, first of all, I just want to get your thoughts on this case. We have a little baby girl, a little baby. Mom drops her off at 8 a.m. to this babysitter's house. The documents say mom's like, she had a little tiny bruise up on her forehead when I dropped her off. But then, babysitter calls at 1 and says, you got to come pick her up. You got to come pick her up. And the baby's got bruising all over her face. I can't even imagine.
You can just start thinking about this, and unfortunately hindsight's 2020, but there's a tougher questionnaire, a tougher interview process to work at McDonald's or to work at a fast food restaurant than there is to hire a babysitter. And, I think it's because we're generally good human beings and we trust people. And when someone's recommended as a babysitter, or you find somebody advertising themselves as a babysitter, we just assume they know how to take care of kids. It's just something that, good people know how to do. We should be a little more skeptical. And I'm not blaming the parents, but, hindsight's 2020, and what's your most precious asset? Your child. We all have to be more aware, and hope this is a lesson for other parents out there.
I hope it is too. And sometimes people are desperate to find somebody to watch their children. Childcare is incredibly expensive. And it sounds like this woman came recommended to the parents in this case. I mean, they had not just one baby, 2. They had twins that they were taking here. And it had only been they had only taken these babies to this woman like a couple of times. And, I don't know how you would have vetted this woman other than maybe going online and looking her up. I looked online and all I'm finding really is that she has an LLC some type of stucco business registered to her. She's the manager of a stucco business, which has, in my opinion, nothing to do with babysitting. I am confused as to how you would even vet this woman other than talking to people that you know. And that seems like that's what happened here. Like, hey, Susie down the street said, yeah, I take my kids to Viviana.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was talking to a lawyer last night who actually interviewed for a job and was given a psychological assessment to practice law, contract law, to review contract, but they wanted to make sure that it was the right fit for this person. And it turns out they said, well, maybe this isn't the right fit. Maybe you wouldn't be happy with your job. Maybe it was a nice way of saying it. Who knows? But if we do that for jobs where the risk is not to a child, but to a contract, it's a financial risk, maybe there should be some standardized formulaic tests. And I'm not suggesting that everyone has to do that, but what can we do better? Because prevention is the cure, is the key, right? After the fact, doesn't do a lot of good. And again, when your neighbor says, I've got a 16-year-old son or daughter who needs some extra money and they can babysit, so many people do that. We all do that. But what 16-year-old is used to raising a child and has experience, with a child? So just need to think a little bit more about that. And again, I'm not faulting these parents. They did what every parent does. They were highly recommended to this person, and they trusted this person, a human being, to care for a child. That's like the one instinct that people have, particularly women, if you want to be sexist about it, that for throughout the history of time, women give birth and women raise children. And, you can call me a sexist or whatever you want, but it's okay to default to, a babysitter who says I'm a good babysitter should know the bare minimums about how to make sure a child doesn't suffer and doesn't have bruises all over their face.
Well, a woman is supposed to have maternal instincts, but at her core, at everyone's core, they're still human beings, right? They're still fallible. Having maybe too many kids in your care is, not a good thing. I want to get into now this, what they're calling a controlled call that mom makes in front of the detectives to Viviana. And, Viviana, according to the documents, said the baby did this to herself. And she gave a couple of different stories. The cops, said when they talked to her, she made inconsistent statements. But specifically this controlled call that mom makes in front of the cops to Viviana, they say in the documents, and we'll put this up on the screen, the defendant explained that the victim had been crying a lot today and believed it was because the victim was sad about being dropped off. During this time, the defendant began making contradicting statements. The defendant advised the victim was brought there in a car seat that was covered with a blanket, and she never observed the victim. Later in the conversation, the defendant explained she did see the victim, and she was rubbing her face with the blanket. When she removed the blanket, she observed the injuries to the victim's face. She further advised that when she changed the victim's diaper, that she did not observe any injuries again on the victim. So she's basically saying they dropped the baby off. There's a blanket over the baby and she's not even seeing the baby. So I guess like the baby's just sitting in the car seat with a blanket and you don't even look at the baby. And then she's like, voila, takes off the blanket and there's bruising on the face. That doesn't comport. Like a baby gets dropped off and you take the baby. Let's say the baby's sleeping, you might take the car seat and set it aside for a little bit and then, then go check on the baby. But come on now. That sounds a little hokey.
If there was a blanket, would take the blanket off to kiss the baby goodbye and hug the baby and see the injuries. And
check
also,
the baby before you leave.
Yeah, and then she'd earlier said that the baby was hitting her themselves. It's crazy. What's interesting, Angenette, about this, though, it's one of those cases where the victim can't really say what happened. So there are no eyewitnesses. There are apparently no cameras of the incident. So you still have that burden of proof to prove that somebody would have intentionally harmed or lack of, thought and just done something that resulted in the harm to a child. It's still a question of proof. And, that's still going to be can a jury believe that somebody would have done this to a child versus how else could it have happened? Is that enough to win beyond a reasonable doubt? It might be enough for civil damages and tip the scales, as we always say. Still makes it a little bit tougher of a trial for the prosecution because they just have to say, well, nobody else could have done it. If I was the defendant, I'd say, you better have more than that. You better have something proving that I did this because I'm innocent and I shouldn't have to prove my innocence. You have to prove my guilt. So it's still going to be an interesting trial, an interesting process.
Well, and I've seen cases too, Randy, where a child, heaven, like, thank goodness this child, this baby is alive. But I did see a case one time that I covered years ago where it was in Wisconsin, where a child, it was so sad, the child died. And then the defense was, well, the child was already injured by the time the child was dropped off at the babysitter. And so the parents are blaming the babysitter for causing these injuries. And then they drop off a sick child who's injured. And then the babysitter is taking the blame and being prosecuted. So she's probably trying to say this baby was already hurt. And then the bruising shows up later because the parents dropped off a fussy baby to me who was already injured. That could very well end up being the defense here.
Right. And often babysitters, if you're working as a babysitter for a living, you may not be wealthy. You may not be able to afford great, resources and great criminal defense lawyers and private investigators and medical subpoenas to try to prove your case. And they shouldn't have to, right? You're innocent until proven guilty. So the burden of proof is always on the state. If we're going to put somebody away for doing this horrific crime, we better be pretty darn sure, beyond not all doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt. It sounds, smells, feels, tastes like she did it. But is that enough to put her away? That's what makes these cases interesting from a legal point of view.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the investigators, they go to the house and they pick her up. Viviana Ortiz-Lopez, they pick her up and they're like, okay, we're bringing you in for questioning. They have a translator because she speaks Spanish. And let's put this one up on the screen. They say in the probable cause affidavit, the defendant explained that she cares for multiple children and that the families contact her only when they need her services. The defendant initially omitted taking care of the woman's children, but when asked directly, she advised she did and only had them for the past 2 days. The defendant further explained that she is the only one who watches the children and is responsible for them. The other children she watches are also toddler aged. So, that's an interesting thing that she didn't even mention these children, the 2 babies, when she was asked about it by the detectives. I'm sure the detectives, when they went to their house, that's pretty common. They were detaining her. They didn't come to her and say, we're coming, we're here, and we need to talk to you about baby X and her bruises on her face. They bring her in and they sit her down and it's a tactic, an interview tactic. And they ask her about her babysitting and see what she offers up.
Yeah, there are all sorts of tactics, and there's translation issues. We've seen situations where someone comes in and says, I want to ask you about this, this, and this, and then they come back and say, but she didn't mention the other. Well, ask her about the other. It's sort of a gamesmanship. And again, you can't pin your whole case on the fact that somebody didn't volunteer something. But, if it's an overt lie, meaning she basically said in response to a question, no, I did not do that, that's one thing. If she didn't volunteer something, she doesn't speak the language. She's not sure what they're asking. She doesn't know what they want. That's an easier one to pick apart for a defense lawyer, I would think. But still, your prosecution is going to try to raise as much, question about her sincerity, her honesty, her credibility as they can. And again, if she doesn't testify, then this may be the only thing that the jury hears from her. So they have to make it good.
Another thing that was kind of really scary to me, it sounds like they think this baby, they said the baby had petechiae, which I thought that you only got petechiae from your airway being cut off. Maybe you can get it other ways, which is really scary to me. They said there were marks under the baby's underarms. There were a lot of things that it sounds like maybe the baby could have been squeezed, shaken, slapped, hit. I'm like, oh my God, what was going on? And was it maybe somebody else in the house hurting the baby too? They're saying in the document, it looked like an adult sized hand caused the injuries. That's like a cop seeing it, but they did have a doctor, a physician, and this forensic nurse examine the baby. Kind of scary.
Yeah, this case is going to rest on the medical testimony, right? Doctors, and the defense is going to cross-examine them saying, not, is this your opinion? Because the doctor might give an opinion that this was caused by the babysitter, but How certain are you in the opinion? How many other options are there? Is it possible this could happen? Are you certain beyond a reasonable doubt that this is the person who caused this injury? What doctor is going to say, I know exactly what happened? It's going to be a good cross-examination. And then, of course, if I was the defense counsel, I'd be asking my client, was there anybody else there? If there was, it's not time to protect your boyfriend or protect your guest that you snuck over to the house. It's time to tell the truth, because that person could go to jail and you could be free, or you could be serving less time. I'd need to know. But right now, we don't know of anybody else. And that sounds like that's an avenue to explore, at least from the defense counsel. And, even if you're afraid that this person is going to hurt you because you throw them under the bus and reveal that they hurt this child, you're covering for somebody, and you're going to cover for them for the rest of your life, because you may be spending most of it or all of it in jail. That's, to be a fly on the wall between the lawyer and this defendant would be interesting.
Well, and the sheriff's detectives also, they're suspicious that there could be other victims, because babies, toddler-age children, they may not tell if they've suffered injuries,
Right.
and maybe they don't have injuries that are as grave as this. So
Or as visible.
I think,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really sad. But she is innocent until proven guilty. I mean, we do need to reiterate that. I mean, these are allegations, these are criminal charges, and the process has to play out.
Yeah.
Randy Kessler, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Angenette.
And Viviana Ortiz-Lopez, she is in the Marion County Jail, where she is being held without bail. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. We will see you back here next time.